Hi, I've created this video for educational purposes, especially for critical thinkers to examine Paul Saladino's somewhat recent video entitled, Are Humans Really Omnivores? This may sound like clickbait at first because, of course, when you look around, most people are consuming omnivorous diets, but what are they really? What are omnivores really, and are humans really omnivores is the question. I think Paul senses that this omnivore concept there's not an airtight definition of an omnivore. Paul is making two main points in the video. One is that humans are not omnivores, I agree with that, and two is that humans are carnivores, I disagree with that. Except, unlike Paul, I'm going to be integrating scientific references to support my point. Like many carnivore diet gurus, Paul's not integrating many scientific references at all, but why would he? His viewers, and he's got a lot of them, aren't looking for that. They're looking for authority. They're swayed by authoritarian views. Paul, you take on that role of authority, and you know it. He's only making 4 references throughout. One's to himself, and another's to Frank Tufano, who is merely an internet entertainer. He's not a reputable reference at all. Another is Chris Masterjohn, okay? And then there's another, I can't make out the name, but we will look at what is being said anyway, and that's towards the end of the video. So a lack of scientific references, but maybe Paul has some insight that might provide him with some points to consider. I will stop the video at points in which I believe it seems as though Paul's making an oversight and analyze it as we go through. We'll talk about those major points. So what is an omnivore? Okay, so as impressionistic young students, we're traditionally taught that omnivores, I say we, I was, most of you probably have, but it is a tradition that young impressionistic students in their early science courses are taught that they are classified as omnivores, and they are growing up in meat-centric environments in which animal products are customarily consumed. It is a custom, a global custom, but a custom nonetheless. And then inevitably they're adopting these animal products into their diet, or it's been fed them. They don't have much choice in the matter, really, typically. So they're developing a taste for them, but taste habituation is subject to diet modification or conditioning as any other behavior is, based on modeling and reinforcement, etc. But with all these factors kind of influencing the young impressionistic child who hasn't had time to develop a strong sense of identity, and then learning this in school before being formally exposed to the discipline of psychology, here we have merely a behavioral definition. That's what an omnivore is. Students are taught that an omnivore is an organism that consumes both plants and animals. What's an organism that consumes both plants and animals? It's an omnivore. This is circular without any universally agreed upon biological features that are common to omnivores. And then how are you going to apply it to humans? Even if you do. So even if you did recognize some features that are universally agreed upon to define an omnivore, of which there's none because omnivore is not a scientific term, and we'll get into that. Those features would be, if they did exist, they'd be similar to a carnivore because the animal would still have to procure and safely digest the animal. And so you'd expect similar features of those carnivores that do just that. And what are those features? Well, the most commonly agreed upon biological feature is the carnassial teeth. You see them back well beyond the canines. Canines for procuring, grasping. Shearing off the flesh, you've got a lockjaw to match, you've got a strong bite force, 2 to 3 times stronger among dogs, and maybe up to 10 times stronger among hyenas. They have the forward-facing eyes, a strong stomach acid to deal with that because they're not chewing meat. Carnivores don't chew meats. If you chew your meat, you're not a carnivore. They gulp it down and let their stomach acid do the work, and that's strong stomach acid with the food in it, not without. That's how it's measured. To distinguish a carnivore, that is. And then they have strong predator reflexes and many others. There's characteristics of the alimentary canal, the non-sacculated colon, etc. But you see, humans don't possess any of these characteristics that are common to carnivores. Well, likewise, they don't possess omnivorous characteristics either. If they were, if you could define them. But the term omnivore, it's a scientific sounding term, but it just doesn't apply to humans. It's a behavioral concept. It belongs in the realm of psychology or psychosociology because it is a social custom, not genetic instructions for people to consume meat when food is otherwise available. Well, let us play this, and you might be wondering at this point, it's like, so far we're talking about classification, it might kind of dry stuff, and in fact many vegans kind of don't spend a lot of time thinking about this, but I'll tell you why it's very important, and that is because Piazza as well as 2015, many vegans are aware of this. They published some research that in which they're explaining why many people, despite the scientific research implicating meat and disease affluence, you have 4 main reasons for those non-vegans to continue to consume animal products, and that is because they believe that it's either necessary, normal, natural, or nice. Nice having to do with taste now. That's what nice is. But these 4 reasons or motives for consuming animal products make up 87% of the reason that people consume animal products. So that's not a small percentage, right? Natural being one of them, and if you're naturally thinking you're an omnivore and that's your identity, when it comes time, when at some point or another during a vegan diet experimentation, if you get older and kind of manage to somewhat deprogram yourself from this idea or this diet that you've grown up with, and experiment with a vegan diet, if you do get that far, and then you really still believe in the back of your mind that you're an omnivore, you may easily backfire if you get sick with a junk food vegan diet, which is not uncommon, given that most vegans can adopt vegan diets for environmental reasons and animal welfare a little bit more frequently than nutrition, so nutrition taking a backseat to those, and then the general population consuming foods or diets based first on cost, next on taste, nutrition being third, and now the vegan, you've got nutrition, falling behind, taking a back seat again to environmental factors and animal welfare. So it may, on the average, be where are we at? Fifth motivating factor for consuming a given food. That's way down the list. So you are liable to get some health problems. And if you really believe you're an omnivore, if you haven't got by that naturalistic fallacy, one of the 4 N's, the natural part, then it's easy to give up and say, well, that diet didn't work for me, and it wasn't natural. I was doing something unnatural anyway. So no wonder many vegans are backfiring. Well, this is what I see. This is why this omnivore concept is important, and because it's just so often misused and misapplied. I'm going to play this video and stop at key points here.
But they can eat plants during times of survival, a carnivore, like a tiger or a lion, or you can have a facultative carnivore like a dog and a canine, descendant of a wolf, right? And
well, I've got a problem already. We're not even a minute in the video, and what's the first example Paul's bringing up? A dog. A dog is a member of the carnivora order. Okay? And carnivore, as discussed, as mentioned, as covered, humans are far from carnivores. Okay? And he has overlooked the opportunity to use other great apes as diet models, who have the most similar nutritional requirements, who have the most similar digestive systems. Missed opportunity right from the beginning there.
those kind of animals, meat is the main source of their nutrition, and it provides all the nutrients they need in the best balanced forms and the most bioavailable forms, but they can.
Another problem I have very early in the video, Paul's speaking fast, he's enthusiastic, he's been on this carnivorous diet for 5.5 months at the time he put this video together. But in his haste and his excitement, his zeal to adopt this carnivorous diet, he's making some fallacious arguments or points here, and that is that the most bioavailable form dictates the type of diet that's most suited for a given organism. Well, the most bioavailable is not the same thing as the most biochemically compatible. It's often the case that nutrients are digested in a regulated manner, not without regulation. Let's take iron as an example, for instance. And you can use other examples, but just looking at iron, we see that, and keep in mind now that the bioavailability for iron among humans is 20%. If the bioavailability of a substance were an indicator of what's a natural diet, how does this fit in that chicks absorb 93% of heme iron, a type of iron in animals, and rats 68%, and cats, which are far more carnivorous though, they're obligate carnivores, they're 70%, and dogs 90%. Humans only absorbing 20%, maybe 22 to 23% of the heme iron is bioavailable for human. Well, you might say, well, that's a lot more than the plant iron. That's true, but again, the plant iron is absorbed with regulation. Why is that important? Let's get into it. There is a real problem with iron overload or high iron stores. They're associated with Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, I think diabetes, but cancer and others. They readily cause oxidative stress, high iron stores, that is iron in excess. It is a problem, especially in developed nations. This is not to minimize the problem of iron deficiency. That's a whole different topic and can be addressed potentially with other digestive cofactors. So digestive cofactor, and this is not for individual nutrition advice. I've already mentioned this for educational purposes. You may have a specific situation. Find your healthcare practitioner to deal with that if that's what you're seeking. Now you can see here that the heme iron, the iron in animal products, is absorbed in a much higher rate than non-heme iron, and that's plant iron. But look closely at the numbers. The plant iron is a tenfold difference in the absorption rate of plant iron. That's a big difference, and it depends on iron stores, it depends on digestive cofactors. So there's a protective, it's called the iron withholding defense system. It's real. There's a reason for it. But you see, the heme iron is absorbed at much higher rates, and the difference is only a factor of 3. So it doesn't vary much depending on iron stores. So you can have high iron stores, and you're still going to be absorbing a higher amount of iron. Got a lag going on here. Thanks for your patience. It is loading. It's all this material I've got here. I've got all this material queued up. It just happens to appear on my screen here for you. Yes, it will. There it is. Where am I here? Ah, yes. Guinea pigs. They're strict herbivores, and yet guinea pigs are often selected as animal models in studying the absorption rate of heme iron. So they absorb it among the highest rates. That is, among the highest rates, and they are strict herbivores. So this bioavailability is not a good enough indicator and doesn't necessarily determine biochemically compatible food. So it's the same reason that iron is not absorbed. You have chelators that prevent iron absorption. That's other metals. I'm sorry, phytates are chelators of iron as well as other metals, and that happens in pigs that are really herbivores as well. Same mechanism. The plant foods having big high in phytates inhibit the absorption. People call these phytates anti-nutrients or fibers anti-nutrients, but they're really nutrients that inhibit the absorption. They're still nutrients. They've got their benefits. They're not anti-nutrients. This is careless classification. Heme iron, it can be used to address iron deficiency as well as plant iron, but it is more effectively or more bioavailable, even among other species that are not carnivores. And here we have this issue of cholesterol, but the same can be said for iron, and that is that it contributes to, it can be said because it's true, high iron stores feed parasites. So zoonotic parasites, and this is potentially a bigger problem than what's been previously known to be the case historically, and that parasites were a frequent occurrence in direct lineage consuming animal products, especially if they weren't cooking it enough. The cholesterol, the iron, the high stores, they contribute to parasitic infections and iron and because the parasites consume the iron and the excess cholesterol. So, same with a horse. We have horses that are, if they're heavily parasitized, they can lose iron. And that's the same with cholesterol. Humans can lose cholesterol when they're heavily parasitized. Here we have numerous different types of parasites, and that parasites, the pathogenicity and the virulence of the parasites are increased based on the amount of cholesterol that's available for them. Parasites not synthesizing their own cholesterol, and that's the same with iron. So this is why in developing nations, hunter-gatherer populations, they tend to have lower cholesterol levels than humans in developed countries, because the parasites are gobbling them up. That's one thing contributing. And direct lineage ancestors, that was the case too. So if you're going to adopt this high cholesterol diet, well, the parasites was your medication before the statins. And this also overlooks the fact that direct lineage, just going back 10,000 years ago, it was found that members were consuming 130 grams of plant fiber a day. And even in hunter-gatherers today, it's 70, 90 grams. I consume about 90 to 100 myself. The average recommended intake of fiber is about 30, and most people are consuming less than 20, closer to 15. So these are just the bare minimum advised intake of fiber, and humans aren't even getting anything close to that. So all is recommending a diet totally devoid of any fiber. Well, Paul goes on to describe another characteristic of a carnivore, and that is an animal in which there's no unique purpose to consume plant matter. But when you look at it, humans do. And this article goes into details about one of those reasons or unique requirements or unique benefits of consuming plant matter, and that is that it reduces tumor development, or inhibits tumor development. And that's what fiber does. So it serves that unique purpose. Let's listen as Paul has more nuggets of information to share. I'm going to skip on over to 2 minutes and 22 seconds into the video.
No other carnivore on the planet does that. No other tribal people on the planet, no indigenous people on the planet does that at all. But the key is in the brain, there's marrow, there's organs, which have unique nutrients relative to the muscles. You can't just eat the muscle meat. That's a silly way to be a carnivore. No other carnivore on the planet does that.
Paul says it's silly to eat meat alone, not with the other components of the animal. This would include the fur and the skin, which Paul does not advocate consuming, and Paul himself consumes highly processed animal diets, consuming powdered forms of the bones that are consumed. And another feature of carnivores is the wider esophagus, so they're gulping down these animal parts sort of indiscriminately. They're consuming the whole animal as plant consumers consume the whole plants. Or frugivores consume the whole fruit with the fiber. So there's such a thing here as animal fiber. And that's what's being talked about in literature here. We see that there's beneficial bacteria that are developing, and a reduction of the harmful ammonias and harmful byproducts of fermenting protein, putrefying protein. And these harmful bacteria are reduced in numbers on a diet that includes the indigestible components of animal products, such as bones in whole form. The hair and the fur also has this effect, and also adds bulk to the digesta, stimulating peristalsis and thereby pushing out the digesta and then forming looser stools. This distinguishing two types of stools, one looser and one firmer, indicating the different components that are being consumed at different times when the carnivores or scavengers are working on meat. And let's be clear here, an omnivore is a glorified scavenger. Also, there's this, of course, as I mentioned, the tempering protein fermentation, because it's pushed through much quicker with these undigestible components. Another example in this article, it's making reference to cheetahs in this study. Dogs are another. Wolves have been studied, and other carnivores. Not a lot, though, but it's being referred to as animal fiber here. And again, these undigested parts, including the fur, is what the natural carnivores are consuming, and they're healthier for it, having similar effects to their gut bacteria as plant fiber does for humans. If you look at the longest living animal, dog at his time of 25 years of age, was on an all-plant diet. So you could argue this dog was getting all the nutrients he needed on a plant-based diet. Now, I'm not advocating necessarily an all-plant diet for dogs, but he was healthy, and this is a strict carnivore.
Role in the human diet, and if you've listened to my debate with Lane Norton, or any of the other things I've done, if you've listened to my stuff on YouTube, if I've listened to my stuff, if you listen to my stuff on Instagram, you'll know that I think that plants have a lot of toxins in them, and that can be a big issue for people. That can be a big issue for the digestion, all kinds of things like that. Somebody just said the connection's kind of shaky.
It's okay. I'm not saying that everyone can digest plants equally, and I'm not advocating vegetables particularly, but hybridized vegetables, a lot of those toxins have been bred out. Most all of them are. Some of those so-called toxins have medicinal purposes, or can be in herbal remedies, preventing degenerative diseases. But what about this issue of toxicity? How did our ancestors deal with it, if this is true? Well, if we look at comparing humans to, again, members of our biological family, we see that, backing up here for a second, we can see that the bitter taste, the genes associated with bitter taste, have been used to protect our ancestors from toxicity. Bitter taste is associated with toxicity, and the genes associated with these are not much different now among humans than they have been and are among closely related species that go through their environment consuming nothing but plants items. So they're using this. This is how it helps them to avoid the toxic substances. They can taste the bitter taste of them. Humans have this capacity. Here it is. There is no evidence that the rate of loss of bitter taste receptor genes varies among humans and apes. So we have that. So if it tastes bitter, we would avoid it. And your answer would be fruit then. Succulent tropical fruit is not bitter. But Paul completely ignores this.
Toxic, but we can use them during a time of starvation. So if you're thinking about being a facultative carnivore as a human, and you're eating nose to tail, what are the 4 compartments or the 5 compartments of an animal? You have to have muscle meat. That is what everybody wants, right? Everybody's getting steaks. Nobody's not getting enough muscle meat when they're...
Well, not everybody has maintained the taste for steak, Paul, so you're taking that for granted. It is quite disgusting when you're experienced with an exclusionary diet. But Paul is talking about consuming nose to tail, although throughout the video he mentions powdered forms of supplements and cooking a lot, heavily processing his diet, and even he gets into talking about eggs. But he doesn't even consume the egg nose to tails, much less the animals. He's not consuming the fur and the skin. And he's consuming, I think, the yolks and then tossing the egg whites out. So, Paul, you're not really sticking to your own diet advice here.
Collagen, a great source of glycine in the collagen. So you can use bone broth. It's got to be jelly when you actually chill it to make sure there's enough collagen in it, but use bone broth, use hydrolyzed collagen. I even use pure glycine powder sometimes. Oh, great. Somebody said it helped them out a lot. And you love bone broth. That's awesome. So I use pure glycine. Is that it's across a broad population, and we know that most of the population is vitamin K2 deficient. So there's K1, which is phytoquinone, and K2, which is MK4, and K7, and K11.
Is most of the population vitamin K deficient, as Paul states? Is that true? Well, first of all, vitamin K deficiency, among those groups commonly deficient in vitamin K, what's absent is the plant consumers, because plant consumers get plenty of vitamin K converted to K2. So it's not a problem for vegans, but is most of the population vitamin K deficient? Or is this exaggeration on Paul's part? Remember, he's not using any scientific references, and although he has a PhD, I'm going to hold him to higher standards than someone who doesn't have a PhD. So instead of appealing to authority, I'm going to look for him to maintain his credibility first. The deficiency rate is 8 to 31% of vitamin K. So no, that's incorrect.
Boron, I talked a little bit about that on my Instagram. If you guys are not familiar with me on Instagram, make sure to follow me there. I talk about stuff all the time. I do not think you can get too much K2 if you eat organ meats and egg yolks. I think this is one of the recurring themes that generally when you are eating animal foods, this is something we've been doing evolutionarily as Homo sapiens, as Homo erectus, as Homo habilis, as all of our pre-primate ancestors for 2.5 million years. And
Pre-primate ancestors of 2.5 million years back? What? No, it extends almost 70 million years back, depending on your source. In this source we see it goes back 60 million years, maybe more. So yeah, 2.5 million years pre-primate ancestors? No. Primates go back 60, almost 70 million years ago. Now, this is just to say, I think Paul knows this, but somebody who thinks that they're a natural carnivore, I'm not going to take anything for granted. No offense, but yeah, but you're speaking fast, very enthusiastic about your diet there, and there are some gross oversights here. Let's skip on over to 10 minutes and 45 minutes. I'm going to wind down here in just a minute. I know this is a long video, and there's more I could touch on, but I'm just going to
be fine with egg whites. But if you're sensitive, some people react to egg whites. Generally, when you cook egg whites, it creates most of the avidin. I don't eat egg whites at all. I just do the yolk. It's easier for me. I eat the yolks raw. That's one of the weird things I do. So all the 5 compartments of the animal, we got bones, bone meal, we got muscle meat, we got collagen, and we got organs. Careful. So be careful with that one. But I dehydrate my liver. I'll do a video about it, but it's really easy. I take raw liver, I put it in the dehydrator. I have a Nesco dehydrator. I throw that sucker on for 24 to 38 hours, 42 hours, maybe 48 hours, 135, 140 degrees. The whole house smells like liver for a few days.
So now we're getting into the recipes, and here we're seeing a heavily processed food. So Paul starts with raw liver, and I guess taking a naturalistic approach initially, but then he dehydrates it at 140 degrees, up to 140 degrees. That's cooking, that's not dehydrating. So you're denaturing those amino acids, some of them as far back as like at 113 degrees and on up. So they're all pretty much denatured at before 140 degrees. And you're doing it for 2 days. So now you're cooking the heck out of it. Highly processed. He's making liver crackers. So there's your important recipe for that. So yeah, I'm not finding any relevant points beyond this. Here, let's go on to 1458, where Paul tries to allay your worries about any potential cancer risk, because there's a lot of research associated with animal products and cancer risk. Let's listen in. Maybe there's some more nuggets of information we can look at here.
The bioavailable foods on the planet, they're animal foods. And if you listen to the debate with Lane and other people, other things I've talked about, the answers are, the objections around cancer and other issues are not a problem.
We're there to help. Cancer's not a problem. According to Dave Lane or Blaine or something or another, I don't know who he is. I might be butchering his name. He said that fast, but I didn't even find any information on him. Well, according to the World Health Organization, that's a reputable source. They're using over 700 epidemiological studies, actually over 1,100 if you're including both processed and unprocessed meat. Red meat is still classified as, this is unprocessed red meat, still classified as a group 2 carcinogen, and processed red meat a group 1A carcinogen. But so-and-so said it's not a problem. And Paul leaves it at that. And his viewers seem to be okay with that. That's all he had to say about it.
My book is going to come out probably in a few months. I was just down in Los Angeles talking to some folks about that. I've got the ideas, I've got the outline, and it's going to kick ass. I think it's really rock the world in terms of these concepts, and it's going to be fun. So I'm going to talk about it.
Stop the press. All you're doing is kind of perpetuating some of the myths around omnivores and carnivores, and actually making some of them worse. Look, an omnivore is a psychosociological classification or typology. It's a behavioral classification. It's not biological. I think the main difference here is that Paul really does believe that there is such a thing as an omnivore. I've explained that there's not, and if there was, humans aren't even omnivores, much less carnivores. Leave your comments below. I challenge you to point out, I'm not coming from a position of authority. I'm making the effort to use the references. If I've misinterpreted something, let me know. I want to know. I'm not speaking, I don't want anybody to agree with me just because I say to.